Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cloud Wars Live, where we explore today's digital revolution by speaking with business executives and thought leaders who are changing how the world lives, works, plays, learns, and dreams. Our guest today is our good friend, Chris Lochhead, who is a podcaster, author, entrepreneur, advisor, and general all-around good guy, opinionated, king of the world here in many, many ways. And we are delighted to have you, Chris. Welcome. It's always a pleasure. And I get the sense that you got some things on your mind today.
I do. Senator Evans, good to see you. And I must compliment you on the beautiful turtleneck you're wearing this morning.
Yes. Well, thank you. I thought it'd catch your eye, and it's just, part of the mid-May couture here at this time of year, Chris, but thanks for noticing that.
Always been a fashion inspiration to millions.
Yes. Well, in ways good and bad, I think. And hey, folks, our good friend Chris is part of our Digital All-Stars. He's talking with us as part of a monthly installment called Lochhead on Different. And Chris has really been zeroing in with his podcast and a lot of the writing he does on this notion of micro niches, or with his recent best-selling book, Niche Down. So the focus of what Chris wants to talk about today is this point where the intersection where technology hits society, people, our everyday lives, innovation, what's going on with some things in entrepreneurship and these new companies, from IPOs to some interesting takes on Facebook, Chris, right? From on the one hand, is it too big, all the way out to the other side of is Facebook starting to niche down? So why don't you pick one you wanted to start with there, right? You had some thoughts about Uber?
You want to start with Uber? Sure.
Yeah.
So, Uber is just going public here, and we'll see where they land in terms of the value of the company, but it looks like they're going to be valued at around $80 billion. And look, here's the thing that the mainstream media is not talking about anywhere near enough on this topic. There's a criticism of Uber, and they got a new CEO, and the gig economy is having some backlash, and everybody likes to dogpile on to some of the negative. And look, some of those topics are important to deal with, and so they have their place. However, I think a lot of people are forgetting what Uber represents. So if you take a step back, Uber was founded in March of 2009. So let's just get our head around that. First of all, that was 10 years ago. So in 10, relatively short years, a relatively small group of people, in the beginning, there's 23,000 of them now, I think. But in the very beginning, a very small group of entrepreneurs get together, and in 10 years, they create something legendary that didn't exist before. And so what the mainstream media is not going to shine enough of a light on, that I think is important for all of us to remember, is the power of technology entrepreneurship. We live at a time, and we live in a place where a small group of people can come together, pirates, dreamers, and innovators, with a big idea to make a big difference and to create massive value. And in their case, to design a legendary product, company, and category. They created a whole new paradigm of personal transportation. And in 10 short years, they have created this new category. And to put it into context, you want to talk about a company that scaled over 600 cities in 65 countries, 23,000 employees, and almost 4 million Uber drivers. And, we'll see how the stock plays out over time, but looking like about an $80 billion market cap. And so the big aha for me, and the thing I hope people take from this, is the possibility of entrepreneurship. 3 years ago, the Wall Street Journal declared a crisis in American entrepreneurship. And if you look at most of the data, what you see is we're at one of the lowest levels of entrepreneurship in American history. And if you read the research, as I have, people like the Brookings Institute and others point to things that our government does to really impede the opportunities for small entrepreneurs and for startups. The vast majority of the job growth in our country comes from smaller companies and startups. The vast majority of innovation, as measured by new patents, come from smaller companies and startups. And what I hope people take from Uber is inspiration. It's very easy to look at this and go, oh, well, that was just a moonshot, or that was a lottery ticket, or they just got lucky, or whatever it is. No, we live at, I think, the most exciting time in the technology industry and in a decade. And remember, they started during a recession. 2009, the economy was in the shitter. And so in a short 10 years, what these folks have achieved, even yes, with some bumps in the road, and even yes, having done some things that are worth being critical of, for sure, but $80 billion worth of market cap, 22,000, 23,000 people, 4 million drivers, 600 cities. This is an extraordinary technology entrepreneurship achievement. This is the thing that I think gets lost, Bob, is people forget that this is an entrepreneurial company. A few people got together and dreamed and schemed over this thing, and in 10 years made this happen.
And Chris, that one of the things that you and I have chatted about some before is some people will say, they see something like Uber and they say, well, that was obvious. Well, yeah, it's obvious after somebody else comes in with a wild idea, with a great platform, and with this incredible passion that you talk about, and actually changes things. But
yes,
it sure as heck wasn't so obvious to everybody beforehand. Or if somebody said, geez, taxis are crappy, I wish there's an alternative, into that void jumped some people with a dream. What do you call pirates, dreamers, and innovators? And
yes,
they went. It'll never be the same again, right? This is the history. Transportation will never be the same.
And listen, I think they will be looked at, I think Lyft as well, as coming together and creating a real new tipping point in how we think about transportation. Obviously, they're working on smart cars. I had a conversation yesterday with an entrepreneur who's in a very, very hot early stage company backed by some of the greatest VCs in Silicon Valley history, who is a leader in autonomous and smart for vehicles and transportation. I don't want to get into the specifics of what they do. These are big, big innovations. And I think we'll look back on 20 years and say, these were the folks that got the party started. And I think for whatever mistakes and problems they've had along the way, they should be celebrated as such. And more importantly, I think it should be something that we all take as inspiration. I couldn't help myself, Bob, to think and go, well, what have I achieved over the last decade?
Yeah. And Chris, the government thing, just to set that aside quickly for 1 second, but how many times in the last few years have you heard people, whether they're, people in a big company or entrepreneurs, saying something along the lines of, we're trying to do for this sector or this market or this industry what Uber did over here, what Airbnb did here? They have set, your point about inspiration, they have sort of stormed the gates here and said every one of these sort of big, old-fashioned, ineffective, and unpleasing experiences or markets or services, they are ripe to be disrupted and turned over. So I don't think you could possibly overestimate your point there, Chris, about the power of inspiration.
And I read an article recently as they were getting ready to go public that said that Uber wants to be the Uber of everything. And so to your point, right? For the better part of a decade, we've had entrepreneurs showing up in Silicon Valley telling VCs, hey, we want to be the Uber of fill in the blank. And now Uber's saying, hey, wait a minute, we want to be the Uber of fill in the blank too.
Chris, one of the other things with that too, right, is that this notion of inspiration and of what is possible here, right? Because like we were saying, there was a sense of, you talk about, there are moats around certain businesses or industries or things like that. And say, well, you can't get into the taxi business because it's political. They've got medallions and, there's the depreciation, the cost. There are always excuses thrown up, all the reasons why we couldn't do it. They came in and I think showed, no, it's not only possible, but if you have the right sort of imagination and passion and commitment and energy, you can do this. And I really think that your point, thousands of entrepreneurs doing this, and I think it's catching on here more so, not just like it's possible, but it's a good thing to do. Chris, the other thing coming around here, maybe some of these governmental folks that are, for whatever unimaginable reason, are trying to make it more difficult for entrepreneurs to succeed. Maybe the power of this Uber idea, the Lyft IPO, the Uber IPO will finally get some of these people to understand that nobody's expecting a lot of these folks in government to do good things, but just don't do bad things. Get the hell out of the way.
Well, and we talked about this a little bit last time as well. You know, hashtag vote entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
So why aren't we forcing a discussion that says, hey, in our country, we want more Ubers, we want more Lyfts. You know, Beyond Meat just went public, right? And they're the category designers of a whole new quote unquote alternative meat category, right? And had a gigantic IPO. And we've continued to see this innovation coming to market, and the IPO market is more frothy now than it has been in the better part of a decade, if not longer. And so these are very positive things. These companies are creating new ways of doing business, new ways of living, and so forth. And they're creating massive value along the way. They're creating many millionaires along the way. And look, are there some downsides to some of these things? And are there some socialist people who look, okay, fine. And is the traffic in San Francisco terrible? And are the house prices? I got it. But those are problems we want to have here, people, because they're problems that are generated by innovation. They're problems that are generated by value creation, right? And so, sure, do we have to have a conversation about how we even the playing field and how we raise the middle class? Yes. But just stop. We need to celebrate this stuff, and we need to force our politicians to ask the question: how do we enable many more Ubers? And I think for us personally, you know, the question I had is, well, hey, what have I done for the last 10 years of my life? My own ass. So I think for all those reasons, it's time to celebrate entrepreneurship. It's time to celebrate technology, innovation, and the success these companies are having.
So, Chris, you're going to notice here a very graceful transition I'm about to make. So, another entrepreneur. Mark's influence is staggering, far beyond that of anyone else in the private sector or in government. So, what's going on there?
Yeah. First of all, I'm not sure I believe that. So, you know, I'm sure you've seen this, Bob. Recently, Chris Hughes, who's a co-founder of Facebook, has come out. He wrote a piece in the New York Times saying that he doesn't like where Facebook is, essentially. He says, quote, I feel a sense of anger and responsibility. And then that quote that you just shared. And then the other interesting thing he says is because of the percentage of ownership that Zuckerberg has, and because of the way his shares are structured, he essentially can't remove him from Facebook, right? And so he says he's not accountable to a board, he's not accountable to the government, and now he's saying the government needs to hold Mark accountable, and he's even going further, saying you should break Facebook up. Here's the interesting thing. First of all, you know, I like you, I'm not a huge fan of government regulations. I'm not a huge fan of governments breaking up companies. And isn't it interesting to hear this? You and I have been in the show for a while, and you and I both remember there was a drum beating in the 90s that said exactly this same stuff about Microsoft. And there was real talk about breaking it up and taking the operating system piece out and the applications business. Remember all that stuff, right? And the jungle drums were beating loudly on that. And of course, it didn't happen. And here's the thing that I think a lot of people don't get. And look, I don't know what this guy's deal is, right? I don't know if he's just feeling bad, or if he's got some axe to grind, or maybe he doesn't like Mark anymore, or maybe he envies him. I don't know what his real motivation is. Let's assume it's a positive motivation, but I don't really know. The interesting thing is this guy saying this at what might be the point in time where what I would call technology evolution actually gets Facebook. Because I think if you roll the clock forward another 10 years, I think Facebook, there's a high degree of likelihood, let me say it this way, that Facebook is nowhere near this influential 10 years from now. And here's the big aha. And I learned this from my friend Gina Bianchini, who's the founder and CEO of Mighty Networks. She came on my podcast about a year ago. We're about to drop a new episode with her. And she was the founder of a company in the very early days of social networking. And frankly, a lot of people thought she was going to be the Zuckerberg before Zuckerberg was the Zuckerberg. She was on the cover of Fortune magazine. I'm trying to remember the name of her first company now. Maybe it'll come to me. But her company today is called Mighty Networks. For that period of time, she has believed in a very different worldview than Zuckerberg's. And my buddy and co-author of Play Bigger, Kevin Maney, just wrote a story. You know, Kevin has a way of capturing something in on a moment like very few others. And so he recently wrote a fantastic blog post about that things are actually going into a completely different place. And he says Facebook's evolving mission statement is evidence that people are craving smaller communities and niche experiences. And what Gina has believed for a long time, and it's what her new company is really trying to get done, is she believes you and I don't want one monster social network. She believes that you and I have different dimensions. You know, you and I love the technology business and we have other interests in life. I love music and I love surfing and, you know, chickens and, and so forth,
Sure.
right? And she thinks what's going to happen over time is, like virtually every company has a website, they're going to have their own private niche network. Because if you care about guitars or you care about chickens or you care about, you know, the enterprise technology industry, then what human beings naturally gravitate towards are small, like-minded tribes. And interestingly enough, Kevin points out in his article about this that that even Facebook is beginning to get this. He says back in 2014, their mission was, quote, make the world more open and connected. And the goal was to have everyone on Earth online in one big global family. That's what Kevin says. And now he says that Facebook, according to Zuckerberg, will fundamentally be more private experiences. That's what Zuckerberg's saying. And so isn't it interesting that it's taken us this long to realize human beings want to be in smaller tribes based on shared interests. That's been true since the beginning of humans. And maybe, this is the part I find fascinating, maybe after all these years, my buddy Gina Bianchini is going to turn out to be right. And these niche networks are going to be the future. And wouldn't it be interesting if Gina's company and others like hers became the new social platforms that allow companies and individuals, you and I can set up, you could set up a Cloud Wars niche network if you wanted using her platform, right? And so here's my point. I don't know where the future is going to go. I have a suspicion Gina is right, and I think Kevin's put his finger on it beautifully. And if they're right, we may be at the beginning of the end for Facebook because they may not be able to make this, and I'll use the term pivot to this niche experience. And so I always find it funny that it seems to be at the just where the thing starts to crack and people start to call for government intervention, where innovation takes over, new categories take over, and we see companies get diminished as a result. And so I think we should just stand back and let this thing play out. I don't believe the government needs to get involved here. And I think there's a chance that there's this new set of categories of niche networks that emerge here. And regardless of whether that's right or not, I think we should pay close attention to how this is going to play out.
Yeah, the niche network, Chris, I think is a great idea. And you know what you mentioned there about the possibility, can Facebook pivot? And I know last episode you used the hockey term about stick handling. Pivot's fundamentally a basketball term, right? You know, you got the front of your foot down, you can spin one way or the other on it. I don't think pivoting in this case is close to the move that Facebook would need to make. They have to do a double backflip to be able to get to this point. And when you weigh 5 billion tons, it's pretty hard to do a backflip. So your point there, I think, into that void, and Facebook was all about scale and, like you said, the global family and this and that. And, you know, there's some number of people want to get into that, but ultimately it's those smaller connections you said. And again, this is one of these things, right? Every so often, why is it that people say, well, that's it, you know, that's the end of innovation. Hey, there's Facebook, there can't be anything else. You know, there's Uber, there can't be anything else. But I think your point and what Gina's doing there, Mighty Networks, Kevin's articulation about that, there's always stuff that wants to happen, right? I don't think this innovation and somebody coming in and doing something really well, it doesn't close off opportunity, it opens them up more. And I think coming back again, your point about inspiration is so powerful there, Chris. And you know, there's you see these articles, well, some Uber drivers feel they don't get paid enough. Okay, but there's 4 million drivers. They can't all feel that they're not getting paid enough, right? And, you know, over time,
Well, they wouldn't be doing it if
Yeah.
it didn't make sense for them in their lives. I mean, they might be bitching about certain things, and maybe Uber needs to get better. I get it. No. But hey, this is an opportunity you seized on. There must be something good about it, right?
Yeah, I don't think they drafted those 4 million. I believe those people volunteered and stepped forward and wanted to do this. If they don't like it, go do something else. It's perfectly okay. But these notions of big companies scaling and all this sort of flips over into that point you brought up about Disney, right? And the Sean Ammirati, one of your digital all-star peers here, was talking about the Disney Netflix thing going on, and this great response that Disney made with Disney Plus and some of the things they're doing. But you've got some pretty interesting ideas now about how that hits not just the digital world, but the physical world.
Yes, I find this fascinating. So Disney has created this Star Wars, what do they call it here? Disneyland's Star Wars Galaxy Edge. I don't know why they came up with that name. By the way, just on the Plus thing, you know, Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, right, is their web service. Except there's all these pluses starting to emerge. When you hear a company launch a product or a service with the name Plus in it, what it says is the CEO and CMO of that company completely ran out of ideas. It is the dumbest ass name in history for any new product or service. But I digress. So Disneyland Star Wars. So I read this hysterical article. They've spent $1 billion on this thing. Did you know they got rid of Frontier Town for this thing?
No way.
Now, how disappointing is that? See, look, I think Star Wars is wonderful, but I want to go to Frontier Town. How dare they get rid of Frontier Town? Very disappointing. Anyway, so they pivot from Frontier Town to Star Wars Galaxy Edge, and they spend $1 billion on this new theme park. And it's taken untold years to create this thing, and they're about to go live with it. They're going live with it. May 31st is the launch date. So there's two things I find fascinating about this. Guess how many, I don't know if they call it a roller coaster or just mega attraction or what they call it these days, but guess how many mega roller coaster attractions will be available on day one?
12.
One.
No.
Yeah, one.
Wait,
One.
on opening day, this is a Disney thing, but I thought Disney always gets the logistics, you know, bam, dead center.
Well, I don't know if they'll have other things, but in terms of like a real attraction, apparently it's going to be one. They call it the Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. Will be operational on opening day. I don't know what the hell else will be open on operational day, but that'll be the thing. And they have another attraction coming apparently later this year. So they're going to open with one big attraction. And guess what their biggest problem is here, Bob?
What it usually is at Disney?
The lines.
Yes.
And so to deal with the fact that they're going to have experiencing, quote, crushing crowds, right? And sometimes in the past, they have like 5-hour waits to get on these attractions. Look, I get if you have kids and all that, this may be unfair. But if you're standing in line for 5 hours to get on a Disney attraction, I would posit to you something's off in your life. I'm just, you know, either you're being controlled by a child but it's just, what adult wants to do that, right? But anyways, I digress. So they're going to have one attraction, and they're afraid that people are going to be hanging out in the Star Wars Disneyland too long. And so they're going to give everybody wristbands, and those wristbands will show which 4-hour window you have. That is to say, which 4 hours. So you're going to pay all this money. You're going to wait in line to get on the Millennium Falcon, but you only get 4 hours. And if your wristband says that your 4 hours is up, a park employee dressed as a Star Wars character is going to come over and, quote, politely tell park goers that they need to leave. Hey, thanks for coming to Disney Star Wars. Now get the hell out. How do you like that, Bob?
Well, of the Disney the Star Wars characters who start to herd people toward the exits, they're going to be the Imperial Stormtroopers?
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I'm thinking it's probably not Princess Leia, right? So imagine you go there with your family, you pay all this money, you fly to Southern California, assuming you don't live there. You know, it's whenever you go to these places, either hot, You know, in California, it's probably hot, right? May 31st, it'll be hot. And there'll be lots of people walking around wearing terrible outfits. You'll be paying $20 million for French fries and shit, right? And you'll be walking around Star Wars World. You'll be standing in line for maybe 5 hours to get onto the Millennium Falcon. And you can imagine this stormtrooper coming up to you saying, yes, Mr. Evans, thanks for paying all this money and buying the $250 French fries, but you need to get out of here.
So which 4 hours are on your tickets?
Yeah. You know, the longer I've lived on the planet, Bob, the more my attitude is, the more people that are there, the less I want to be there.
Yeah, but Chris, walk through this a little bit, right? Because you laid out the problem pretty interestingly here. This is a real smart company. So what's going on? Are they intentionally doing something like this to create some sort of media buzz about it, even at the expense of got to be some pretty unhappy customers in this? What's going on here?
I think this is just the beauty of capitalism. I think they say, what can we get away with? And if people will pay to get into the park and pay for the $400 French fries and the $25 Cokes, and they'll wait in line for 5 hours, and then they'll get booted out of the park, and there'll still be a line. As long as as long as people line up, that free market enterprise, right? And so as long as people are waiting in line to get into Disneyland, Star Wars, intergalactic theme, millennium, whatever, then they're just, and I don't know how you get away with a value prop that says, yeah, this thing's really awesome. It lasts for about 3 minutes and you got to eat a 5-hour shit sandwich. It's very expensive to get on it. And people go, yeah, sign me up. Maybe you got a little 4-year-old in your life who's making you do it. And, I understand they can be very persuasive, but it's free market economics at play. Why anybody wants to do this, I will never know. But the interesting thing, I'm going to find them on Instagram so that I can watch all the tags on Instagram as this thing happens to see what people say when they wait 5 hours to get on the Millennium ride.
Yeah, and I don't know, Chris, they're really good at those. We took our niece and nephew a couple of years ago, and I think I heard one employee refer to it as line management. And they see these as people are waiting. I certainly wasn't in any 5-hour lines. Seemed like it, but half hour, 20 minutes. But there's a tiered pricing structure. You can avoid those lines if you pay a little more. Again, your point to beauty of capitalism. Well, they'll say at this point, when you only have another 45 minutes to go, we're going to have one of the Disney characters come over and sing, and the kids were so excited about that. They have stuff you can buy and spend and do along the way, but it's a remarkable thing. Can marketing of an experience like that outpace the ability of operations to deliver the right sort of experience? Are they getting out ahead of what they can deliver?
Probably. And here's the thing I'd really like to see people get excited about. Take your kid for a walk in the woods. If you want to come to California and do something really cool, go to see the redwoods. Hang out with John Muir. John Muir famously said, there's no problem in the world that can't be solved by a long walk in the woods. You want to see something that will blow you away? Go see an 1,800-year-old redwood or sequoia, right? The oldest living creatures, if you'll call them that, living things on planet Earth are right here in California. They are more stunningly beautiful than, with all due respect, all the technology and all the stuff that we love. Whether you call it God or Mother Nature or whatever you want to call it, those creations, I think, are the creations. And, hey, go camping. Go out in the woods. And, hey, if you don't want to come to California, go to Vermont or go to New Hampshire, or maybe there's an awesome place to go camping or hiking near you. Go find that place. Go for a dip in the lake. Go do something outside. Go for a walk. Go for a hike and just notice the beauty of Mother Nature. And there's typically not that bad of a line. There's enough redwood forest parks to go visit that, you could probably figure it out. It probably doesn't take 5 hours for a 3-second experience.
Chris, this is a slightly different environment for that sort of thing. But I had a chance this week to do something sort of like that. And I've always thought it's interesting, and companies handle this in different ways. But that thing that started 15, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, take your daughters to work day. I got a chance this week to have my daughter go with me to work, we were at the SAP Sapphire event in Orlando. And Ella's an entrepreneur. She has her own company. I'm a client. She helps me out with a bunch of stuff. But she came with me down there for 3 days. And it was one of the greatest work experiences I've ever had. So I think your point, there's often magic a lot closer to home and in some simpler approaches than, you know.
Now, there's one thing to be aware of, particularly, you know, if you're going to go to the Grand Canyon or you're going to go somewhere interesting and like that, is have you been tracking all these death by selfies? So there's this article here. I'll send it to you. It's a great one. It's Outside Magazine, you know, which is a great adventure kind of magazine, athletic adventure stuff. And April 16th, 2019 article, selfie deaths are an epidemic. A recent report found that 259 people died between 2011 and 2017 while stepping out in front of the camera. And that was 2017. Selfies are a much bigger deal. I'm sure you saw this on the news. I mean, there's been a couple at the Grand Canyon and a few other areas. So, you know, beware the death by selfie.
Wow. Okay, well, somebody's got to come in. One of these entrepreneurs, Chris, has to come in and invent, you know, something that allows you to do selfies without falling into the Grand Canyon. I think it's a niche, you know, a niche down maybe.
Maybe you know, I'm a backcountry skier, and one of the biggest innovations in backcountry skiing has been the invention of these we call them Avy packs. So it's a backpack that you have all your gear in, because you need a bunch of gear when you're going to go do this stuff. But inside there is essentially this giant balloon, and it acts sort of like a parachute. And the problem with the avalanches is you get encased deep in the snow. And you typically have about 15 minutes worth of air. And why people die in avalanches is not very rarely by getting smashed into something, but often by breathing their own air and they die, right? And so what they teach you to do in avalanche school is, if you're in an avalanche, you want to swim on the top of the avalanche, because when the avalanche stops, it essentially turns into concrete. And what these Avy packs do by having these, essentially, it's more sophisticated than this, but it's a giant balloon. You pull this ripcord on the side of your on the backpack, and this balloon explodes out the back of the backpack. And what it does is it literally floats you on top of this avalanche, which is essentially a river of snow. And so that when the Avy stops, you're on top. So maybe what we have to have are, you know, selfie packs, special backpacks that you wear to protect yourself from the stupidity of whatever it is you're doing with your selfie.
On the other hand, Chris, I don't want to argue with the innovative entrepreneur opportunity there, but perhaps the people that do these sorts of things, maybe it is in their destiny. Maybe it is in the good of the race overall that they move on to their next adventure, you know, on another sphere.
Well, you know, now you're tapping into my grumpy old man. And there's definitely, you know, there's some people who think we have an overpopulation problem. I don't know, the traffic here in the Bay Area would lead me to believe that's probably the case. But I'm not an expert in these things. But there is sort of a Darwinistic thing, and I'm not a selfie kind of a guy. As a matter of fact, I can't take one. I mean, I don't know how many I've taken in my life, but not many. I don't know that I've ever taken one of myself that I posted anywhere. You know, so they're with other people, and nobody looks good in a selfie. Because I don't know, if you're like me, right? You can't. My arm is not long enough to get enough appropriate distance from my big bald head to put the thing in perspective. So any selfie that, maybe this is what's going on for me, I don't like them. I look like a giant beach ball of a head. But anyway, I don't know that anybody really looks particularly good in a selfie. A lot of people, you know, you see their nose hairs and shit. It's not, it's not that attractive. That's why they created the selfie stick.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, maybe next time we can talk about, we'll do reviews. We'll get like 15 or 20 or 30 selfie sticks, and we'll have a lot of fun reviewing those.
Maybe we should do a product session on selfie sticks. Yeah, that's a whole category I wish would go away, but you know, God bless them.
All right, brother. Chris, it's been, as always, an adventure, eye-opener, and thanks for putting the plugs in there for the inspirational drive and that truly profound, world-changing thing of entrepreneurship that has to continue to be emphasized. And I hope people will look at what Uber's doing in different ways based on some of your insights here.
Well, thank you, Bob. It's been a pleasure as always, and I can't wait for next month.
Thank you, my friend. Thanks to all of you folks for being with us at Cloud Wars Live. We'll see you again next time. Please feel free to share your feedback with me, bobevanspa@gmail.com. Thanks. See you soon.